Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
छंदांस्य आकामस्य च यस्य कामान्
Chandamsya kamasya chayasya kaman.
दुदुहुर आजुहुर अथो बलिम नृपा
Duduhur ajaharur atho balim nripa.
प्रत्यंचिता युधि धर्मेण विप्र
Pratyanchita yudhidharmena vipra.
यदा शिशाम षष्ठम अंशम परेत्य.
Yada shishtam amsham paretya.
Yes.
May I read from it?
Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Although King Gaya had no personal desire for sense gratification, all his desires were fulfilled by the virtue of his performance of Vedic rituals. All the kings with whom Maharaj Gaya had to fight were forced to fight on religious principles. They were very satisfied with his fighting and they would present all kinds of gifts to him. Similarly, all the Brahmanas in his kingdom were very satisfied with King Gaya's munificent charities. Consequently, the Brahmanas contributed a sixth of their pious activities for King Gaya's benefit in the next life. Purport. As a Kshatriya or emperor, Maharaj Gaya sometimes had to fight with subordinate kings to maintain his government. But the subordinate kings were not dissatisfied with him because they knew that he fought for religious principles. Consequently, they accepted their subordination and offered all kinds of gifts to him. Similarly, the Brahmanas who performed Vedic rituals were so satisfied with the king that they very readily agreed to part with a sixth of their pious activities for his benefit in the next life. Thus, the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas were all satisfied with Maharaj Gaya because of his proper administration. In other words, Maharaj Gaya satisfied the Kshatriya kings by his fighting and satisfied the Brahmanas by his charities. The Vaishyas were also encouraged by kind words and affectionate dealings, and due to Maharaj Gaya's constant sacrifices, the Shudras were satisfied by sumptuous food and charity. In this way, Maharaj Gaya kept all the citizens very satisfied. When Brahmanas and saintly persons are honored, they part with their pious activities, giving them to those who honor them and render them service. Therefore, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 4.34, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. One should try to approach a spiritual master submissively and render service unto him. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhu. So, Maharaj Gaya, one of the descendants of Maharaj Bharat, he was very pious. So we can see that although King Gaya had no personal desire for sense gratification, all his desires were fulfilled by the virtue of his performance of Vedic rituals. This is very interesting, especially for devotees. You know, we, like Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. And yet here we see that in Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Shukadeva Goswami is actually praising the Vedic performances. So how do we understand, how do we reconcile this kind of a contradiction? Would someone like to comment on this? You know, we have studied Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam for so many years now. Would someone like to comment on why there is an apparent contradiction that in some places Vedic performances are praised and yet in another place they are being criticized? Would someone like to say something about this? Okay. See, that's why I said, you need to study the scriptures very deeply. It's not just a matter of studying, because scriptures are not like some engineering or medicine that you just study and you memorize and that's it. Scriptures, you have to really meditate and understand. That's why in Hindi we call a purport. Prabhupada uses the word purport here, and in Hindi tatparya. You really have to get into the depths of understanding this. See, as a Kshatriya emperor, Maharaj Gaya sometimes had to fight with subordinate kings to maintain his government. So Maharaj Gaya performed Vedic sacrifices not for himself, he performed it for others. Every living being is not on the same level. So as preachers of Krishna consciousness, we meet so many people. Some will have very elevated consciousness and some will have very gross consciousness. And yet the process of bhakti is meant for everyone. So it is designed in such a way that everyone benefits. The Vedic scriptures are meant to elevate persons of every kind of consciousness. So Shudras, they are in Tamoguna. They cannot understand the sublime truths of Brahma. They cannot acquire Brahma Gyan. In fact, in the Vedas, they are forbidden from acquiring Brahma Gyan. Likewise, Shudras are in Rajoguna and Tamoguna. It's very difficult for them to understand. Kshatriyas are in the mode of passion. They are very egoistic. So they have to be, so they have strong bodily consciousness. And Brahmanas, they are pure souls. So under the guidance of Brahmanas, a Kshatriya has to maintain law and order. Brahmanas may be very wise and intelligent, but first of all, they have no desire to rule over men. And secondly, they do not have the physical strength to do that. To rule over men, one needs to be diplomatic, one needs to be subtle. But Brahmanas will speak the truth as it is. So Brahmanas are not fit to rule, though they are very much fit to provide advice to a king. So therefore, great kings, these great Rajarshis like Maharaj Gaya or his forefathers, they were very much qualified to take that position, and they acted under the guidance of bona fide Brahmanas. So therefore, he performed many Vedic rituals. So king is the father of the kingdom. He has to ensure that everyone grows spiritually. And therefore, he had to perform all the Vedic rituals. So that's why it is mentioned that Gaya had no personal desire for sense gratification, and yet all his desires are fulfilled by the virtue of his performance of Vedic rituals. He did it just as a source of benefit to others, and because he was benefiting the whole of the society, he got positive karma, and therefore all his desires are fulfilled. Naturally, because he's a king, he's in a material position, he also must have some material desires. So even though he is of very pure heart, all his even subtle desires were fulfilled because he was performing the Vedic rituals perfectly. But when Krishna is advising Arjun not to perform Vedic rituals, it is from the perspective of transcendence. Arjun is already a liberated soul. So Krishna is advising him to stay on that platform and not decline, and descend to the platform of performing ritualistic sacrifices for the fulfillment of sense desires. So here we see in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining how a king is meant to govern his praja or his public. So in Nectar of Devotion, Srila Rupa Goswami explains the principle of dadati prati grihnati, giving and taking. So that is a loving exchange. In any relationship, there is always give and take. And it is not a monetary transaction or an accounting transaction, but it is always a loving exchange. So in previous ages, people would visit each other's homes and they would be served with food and other gifts. This is the principle of dadati prati grihnati. It's an exchange between two souls. So when the king satisfied the Brahmanas by performance of Vedic sacrifices, the Brahmanas were more than happy to donate 1/6 of their piety to the king. And therefore, king in this life and the next was going to benefit from such a charitable disposition. So in spiritual life also, tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. So we approach a spiritual master, we humbly render service to him, and then we ask questions. So that is the dadati prati grihnati principle, that we render service to the spiritual master and we put our questions. So we serve the spiritual master by giving him physical and physical service and giving him gifts. The spiritual master renders service to us by providing us with transcendental knowledge and the ways of getting out of this material world. So in this way, this principle works in material life, it also works in spiritual life. And actually, if someone is performing the Vedic rituals with a pure heart, they are spiritual. Then they are no longer material. Like in this life, we need to eat food, we need to drink water. So all Krishna is explaining, annat bhavanti bhuta. Every living entity needs grains for subsistence, and grains are produced as a result of sacrifice. So sacrifice has to be performed. In the age of Kali, Vedic sacrifices are impossible to perform. Therefore, we perform Sankirtan Yajna. That doesn't mean that sacrifices are not required or they are bogus. They are needed, but we cannot perform them. We are not qualified. Therefore, the only yajna in this age is chanting of the holy names, which also means that this age is so degraded that anything we take in this age will also be corrupting us. Therefore, we should minimize our desires in this life. For example, let's just take the example of an automobile. An automobile is such a sinful product. It is made of iron and steel, which is extracted from the heart of the earth. So that's an act of violence. Then it runs on petroleum. Petroleum is again extracted from the depths of earth, which is like the blood of earth. So that is also sinful. And then the automobile also, violates the principles of Ayurveda. It is covered over with metal, so therefore it doesn't allow the flow of prana. So in this way, we are violating the regulative principles, the Vedic principles. And in this age, this is the age of automobiles. Everyone, like every country, every part of this world is full of automobiles. So we can understand that we are so degraded. So if we are living with automobiles, we are not pure at all. So how can we perform yajna? Grains are not pure, ghee is not pure, brahmanas are not pure, so no one can perform sacrifice. Therefore, chanting of the holy names. So we have to minimize our attachments to this world. We have to stay away from the objects of this world. And this is the only way we'll be able to purify ourselves. Hare Krishna. Yes, any questions or comments here?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Prabhuji, in this Katha of Maharaj Gai, what is there for us to learn? But it is more for people who are in a position of leadership and kings and those types. What do we exactly extract from this?
See, actually, there are so many things to extract from this. Look at all these kings. Okay, we are seeing the descriptions of so many kings here. So one point we already discussed on, last Friday we had already discussed one point, that lineage can only be pure when the consciousness is pure. So all these kings who are coming in the line of Maharaj Bharat, which is coming from the line of Maharaj Rishabdev, who's the Lord himself, they are all pure souls. So all of them have made some contribution or the other in propagation of dharma. So in today's age, when everyone is impure, when men are foolish, women are impure, the population would be Varna Sankar, polluted population. That's why children are not becoming devotees. Like even a devotee cannot claim that his children and grandchildren are all very high standard devotees. So that is one lesson, how to maintain the purity of the bloodline by strict rendering of spiritual practices. That's one lesson. Another lesson that we can learn is that one has to perform one's dharma. All these kings, they perform the dharma very nicely. See, everyone wants to enjoy this life, but we see that most of these kings are completely renounced. They are just performing their duty. So they are born in the mode of passion as Kshatriyas. Therefore, they have taken up the role of king, but they are actually detached from all the material opulences. So, if a king can be, so you see, please try to understand this. A king is a very great thing. We have some insignificant property like some apartment in some city, or we have one car, or we have one child, or one husband, one wife, and we are already so attached and so proud of it. These personalities were ruling the world. They were emperors of Bharatvarsh. So we can see, actually, if you see today, the whole world appears to be so populated and so advanced, like China, the West, Russia, America. But in the previous ages, these were all just abandoned lands. All these so-called nations have just risen in the last 200 years or so. Before that, they were just aboriginals. So Bharatvarsh, the present day Hastinapur, Delhi, India, this was the center of the world practically. So these emperors were ruling Bharatvarsh. They were great personalities. They had many wives, many children, a lot of wealth and opulence, and they were blessed by the Lord of all the things. And still they were so renounced that they could leave everything behind. Today, we fail even in our basic duty as a parent. Which devotee can proudly claim that his child is strictly following regulative principles and strictly a devotee with no attachments of this world? Nobody can claim that. And yet we see that we have discussed almost 30 or 40 descendants of Maharaj Bharat, and they are all great devotees. So you see, there are so many lessons to be learned from this. That's why I said, you need to really go into it, think from all perspectives. Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, they have to be literally digested. So, last week there was a discussion with Keshan Prabhu. He's saying the same thing. He said that Prabhupada said, study 1 to 2 hours a day. He didn't say study 6 hours or 8 hours a day. 1 to 2 hours a day you study scrutinizingly, and the remaining day you spend in analyzing what you have studied, meditating on what you have studied. See, Bhagavatam is not like some jolly story here. This is not some Star TV serial or something. that we are just, Maharaj Priyavrat is just gossiping here, and Maharaj Shukdev Goswami is just gossiping here. No. He is mentioning the specific personalities who have contributed tremendously to the growth of spiritual life.
Yes,
So, yeah, so approach their consciousness. So, okay, one hint I can give you is like when you read any pastime, look into the characters who are mentioned in that pastime and their activities. Then try to understand what these personalities have done, what are their actions, what is their position, and what is their consciousness with which they have done this. So if we see, for example, the story of Maharaj Dhruv, it appears to have so many contradictions, so many twists and turns. Maharaj Dhruv is a small child, Balhat, he's like, stubborn, childish behavior. He just wants the kingdom of his father, or a kingdom greater than that of his father. And then in that mood, he meets Narad. And when Narad Muni is dissuading him, he argues with him. So we have heard that we should never argue with spiritual master, but here we see Dhruv Maharaj is actually arguing with Narad Muni. And then he performs his austerity, very harsh austerity, so much so that the universe is unable to breathe. So his austerity becomes so strong, and a small child. And he comes back. Then he gets the kingdom. After getting the kingdom, he then goes to fight. So his mother and brother are killed. Then he goes to fight with the Gandharvas, and then he starts Yakshas, and then he starts fighting and killing them. And then the Lord has to appear and stop him from killing all these people. And specific term is that do not kill innocent Yakshas. So such a great personality who has seen the Supreme Lord himself, he is overcome by mode of passion. And then he prepares to go back to Godhead. And then he goes back to Godhead, and then he remembers his mother. So you see so many twists and turns there. A liberated soul, what botheration he should have whether his mother goes back to Godhead or not. But he's thinking. So how do we understand these pastimes? So when you read something, don't try to run in the scriptures. You just stick to one particular point and analyze it very thoroughly. We are not in a hurry to finish the Bhagavatam, but we must understand whatever we are reading.
So from this pastime, we find like how Maharaj Gaib was following his dharma so well, at the same time very detached, and at the same time he was doing nothing for his own personal satisfaction.
Yes, and still, if you remember Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Kshemam Mahamyaham, we can see that still the Lord fulfills the desires. So you can connect this pastime to Bhagavad Gita and also from Srimad Bhagavatam itself, the story of Sudama. His intention was not even to please Krishna. His intention was to go and beg from Krishna. And yet his humility pleased Krishna so much that he never expressed his desires, and still they were fulfilled and beyond his expectations. So one who serves the Lord, how can he not be satisfied?
Thank you
So
much.
that is all. Yes. So, in this regard, we can also discuss many points actually. In this way, Maharaj Gaya kept all the citizens very satisfied. So there's one, some incident from Srila Prabhupada's life actually. So once Srila Prabhupada was in the United States, and the parents of his disciples came to argue with Srila Prabhupada. They came to, fight Srila Prabhupada. And his disciple was very scared that, these people, they are like rude and obnoxious people. They will just insult Srila Prabhupada. So, and they came in a very angry mood. So somehow or the other, he told Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, okay, let them meet, no problem. And then this devotee was so scared that he did not even enter the room where Srila Prabhupada and his parents were. He got very scared that, there will be some ugly scene now. And then, it took a very long time. The parents didn't come out. And finally, when they came out, they were smiling very broadly. What a saintly gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, and not that they became devotees. They were not chanting or doing kirtan or anything, but they very much appreciated Srila Prabhupada. And another instance is from Australia. Many years ago, this was in the 80s or 90s, some devotee party went to do book distribution in this rural Australia. And when they were traveling, they got lost. Somehow or the other, they landed up in a farm And the farm owner, when he came out, the devotees were very scared. He looked like a hoodlum. He was a big man with thick mustaches, and he looked like a very angry, rude kind of a personality. But when he saw the devotees, he immediately softened. And then he said, "Oh, Hare Krishnas, Bhaktivedanta Swami, yes, such a nice gentleman." So you see, I mean, not that he was a devotee or anything. So a devotee works for the benefit of all living entities. It's not that, we are only concerned with making people chant the holy names and that's it, we don't care. No, a devotee's devotee is doing Jivadaya. Like Srila Prabhupada, he would even feed the dogs or something sometimes. Not that a dog or cat would become a devotee, but Prabhupada would just take care of animals also. So in this way, we can understand that Maharaj Gaya was pleasing all the living entities in his kingdom. I mean, it's not mentioned here, but we can understand that he was taking care of plants and animals as well.
Yes,
Okay. Continue, text 12. Yasya dvare Bhagavan Advaratma
Yasya Sarve Bhagavan Adhar Atma
Maghoni Madhyatya Urusoma Pithe
Moghani Madhyate Uro Sompathe
Shraddha Vishuddhachala Bhakti Yoga
Siddha Visuddha Bhakti Yoga
Samarpitedya Phalam Ajahara.
Samarpityam Palam Ajahar.
Yes.
Narrator too.
Yes, please.
Hare Krishna Sorry. Translation purport by Sri Prabhupada Pujya. In Maharaj Gya's sacrifices, there was a great supply of the intoxicant known as Soma. King Indra used to come and become intoxicated by drinking large quantities of Somas. Also, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, the Jagannath Purush, also came and personally accepted all the sacrifices offered unto him with pure and firm devotion in the sacrificial arena. Purport. Maharaj Gaya was so perfect that he satisfied all the demigods who were headed by the heavenly king Indra. Lord Vishnu himself also personally came to the sacrifice arena to accept the offerings. Although Maharaj Gaya did not want them, he received all the blessings of the demigods and the Supreme Lord himself. Hare Krishna Bhagavan.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. So Krishna Bhakti Keli Sarva Karma Krithaye. One who serves the Lord is serving everyone. Krishna is saying, Mameva Ansh Jeev Loke Jeeva Bhut Sanatana. So every living entity is a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So if the Lord is satisfied, everyone will be automatically satisfied. So even though Maharaj Gaya was not doing anything for his own sake, he still got all the benefits. So see, a devotee is not an enemy of the demigods or anything. Sometimes devotees are under a misconception that demigods are not to be worshipped, means that demigods are something unwanted or something like that. No, actually, the demigods are worshipable and they are very much, the object of our respect and love. Demigods are appointed living entities who are serving the Lord by administering this whole universe. We are so insignificant that we are still wondering whether there is a Lord or not. But these living entities, they are directly receiving the instructions of the Lord to run the administration of this universe. So certainly they are far more advanced than us in the process of devotional service. And definitely, as a result, they are very much an object of our respect and obeisances. The only difference is that we should not be asking them for anything. Demigods like Lord Shiva, Ganapati, Kartikeya, Varuna, Indra, Chandra, Surya, Lakshmi, Saraswati, we should not ask them for anything. We should just offer our respects. If at all, we should just ask them for blessing so that we may have no hindrances in our devotional life. If you see some temple or some image of some of demigod, you should offer your respect mentally, and you should pray that there are no obstructions in the path of devotion. And the demigods will most happily oblige, because they also like to see a Vaishnava. So although Maharaj Gaya did not want anything for himself, he still got all the benefits of the sacrifices, including the blessings of the piety of the Brahmanas. Yes. Any questions or comments here?
Hi, Prabhu. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Yes.
I have a question. It's more of a practical question.
Yes.
If somebody is currently not, how do I put it? If somebody is currently at this current stage not a devout worshipper of Hari, Bhagavan Hari, then what do we do? Do we tell them that they should, or do we, or since they're already, worshipping the other gods, should we, since it's not a bad thing, should we let them do it? I mean, what should we do?
Okay, now that's a very interesting question. So, if someone is worshipping the demigods and not really worshipping the Supreme Lord, what should be done? Let's try to analyze this.
And also, sorry to bother you, but if we could extend this, say if somebody is a Christian or a Muslim and they have their own names for their gods, then what should we also do? Yeah.
That's that's an even better question. Okay. So if someone is let's take the first part. If someone is worshipping the demigods, the question is, why are they worshipping the demigods? The problem is not in the activity. The problem is in the consciousness behind this activity. Why does anyone worship the demigods? So what is their consciousness? The one may say, I am praying for the benefit of my family. Someone is praying for the benefit of the nation. Someone is praying for the benefit of the whole humanity. So these are all good objectives. But one has to do everything with proper knowledge and proper consciousness. If you want to drive a car or a motorcycle, you need to have a proper license. That means that you must undergo some proper training. And then only you can ride it. Even a child can drive a car, but he will have an accident. He will not know. He'll not be able to follow any rules and regulations. So you must have proper education before you do something. So even if you have to worship the demigods, it must be done with proper consciousness. So Krishna is explaining in Bhagavad Gita, Kamastaisthya Hritgyana prapadyante anya devata. So all the so-called activities, of this society, nation, family, these are just based on bodily consciousness of aham mameti. Maharaj Prahlad, Maharaj Bharat is speaking. Pumshamastriya mithuni bhavametam tayor mitho hridaya grantimahu ato graha kshetra sutaptavittayar janasya mohayam aham mameti. So just the attraction between male and female. Pumshamastriya mithuni bhava. Just this bodily attraction between male and female, this leads to formation of illusion. And this illusion expands in the form of children, land, property, occupation, nation, society, and so on. So this is just an expansion of illusion. In reality, the living entity is neither male nor female. The living entity doesn't have any family or nation or anything. It's just like a dream, because it just exists for some time and then it is destroyed. So it is very painful. So this illusion is further compounded when we start meditating on all the demigods to fulfill our desires and do stuff. So demigods are themselves not pure devotees. They are also, karma mishrit bhakta. They have some desires also. That's why they have taken the position of a demigod. They also have their own desires. So therefore, they cannot give us liberation. On the other hand, a sadhu, a pure devotee like Narad Muni or Bhakti Vinod Thakur or Srila Prabhupada, they are pure souls. They have completely renounced this world. So they are completely attached to Krishna. They can provide us with liberation. They can bless us with liberation from this material world. So sadhus have to be worshipped above the demigods. So demigod worship in itself is not bad, but the consciousness behind such worship is bad. It is still on the platform of I and mine, aham mamiti. So if this consciousness is given up, then it doesn't matter. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining that those in the mode of goodness, they worship demigods. In the mode of passion, they worship human beings. And those who are in a mode of ignorance, they worship ghosts. So there are these tantrics, these aghoris and other tantrics who worship ghosts. So there's like Karna Pishachini or Dayan, Dakini, or Pishach, or Yaksha, Kinnar. All these are worshipped by people in the mode of ignorance because they also give lots of benefits. Like if you study Tantra Shastra, the worship, there is something called Shav Sadhana. In Shav Sadhana, you take a fresh dead body, you sit on it, and then you perform tapasya. And when you have satisfied the ghost will become your servant. So the ghost can give you any information you want. Like he'll tell you about stock exchange values, he can tell you about lottery numbers, he can tell you about the outcome of sports and other things. So this is a worship in the mode of ignorance. One will suffer because of it. So in this way, this Maharaj Gaye was worshipping only the supreme. He was worshipping the demigods, but only for the benefit of others, not for himself. Therefore, everyone was satisfied with him. So when we are worshipping the demigods, we should always understand who we are. So this aham mameti, or I and mine, this consciousness comes because we lack the consciousness of the supreme. Athato brahma jigyasa. So we lack brahma jigyasa, therefore we think that body is everything. So we try to please the demigods so that we can live we can happily live a bodily life. But once we have the knowledge of the soul, jnana, the knowledge of soul as distinguished from matter, and Vigyan, the knowledge of the relationship between the soul and the super soul or Paramatma. With this knowledge, one will act knowledgeably. One will be able to give up this material world. So then one can worship demigods also, but he will not be contaminated.
May I ask?
Yes.
Hi, sorry. Hare
Have
Krishna.
I answered your first question, Prabhu?
Yes, I would.
Hmm.
But what about the practical aspect of it?
Yes.
Do we
So-
tell them, or do we let it be, or do we tell them about in which consciousness should they do it? What do we practically tell them, or do we not say anything?
So that's a good point. See, when you meet some demigod worshippers, you should try to understand their consciousness first. Like, for example, if I meet someone, some aboriginal who's worshipping Shiva, Kal Bhairav and eating meat, obviously his consciousness is very low. But for example, let's take the example of your mother only. Now she's very pure. So if she's worshipping demigods, it is probably because she doesn't know the real objective of life. So such souls are pious souls. And because of worshipping demigods, they have already acquired a lot of piety. They're quite pure. So you can gently convince them about the need for understanding the science of the soul also. Gradually go on explaining what is the consciousness of the demigods, what is the consciousness of a pure soul, and how we can attain the Supreme Lord. So as we discuss Bhagavad Gita, you can gradually start preaching. So this is how you preach to demigod worshippers. I mean, they're worshipping demigod means at least they have some faith. They are not atheistic. And that's a big positive. So you can slowly and gently try to explain to them the real purpose of human life. To understand the spirit soul, not just, material world. So you should preach gently like that. We can discuss this more when we meet.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. And the second question is regarding Muslims and Christians. So there again, the same thing. What is their faith? Are they just dogmatic people? I am a Muslim, I must worship Allah. That's it. And I'll just enjoy life whichever way I want. I'm a Muslim. Or, I'm a Christian, or I am a Hindu. So if one has this kind of animalistic consciousness, you can't do much. But if one is genuinely interested in knowing the Lord, then you can start discussing Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita is very universal in that sense. So a logical person will definitely appreciate the Bhagavad Gita. So one may worship by the name of Allah or Christos or anything, but it doesn't matter because the consciousness is to know the Supreme. The Supreme can manifest in so many ways. Nam akari bahuda nija sarvashakti. But the only question is, does he really have a desire to know the Supreme? That's the consciousness. So,
Dhanyavad.
okay. Yeah. Any other questions or comments here? Okay, then we stop here today. Thank you very much, everyone. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.